extend my respect to Aboriginal colleagues here today. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Today we will hear from the Office of Responsible Gambling and Gamble Aware, Hunter, New England. You would have seen through the communications we sent out that Anne Rose research in 2020 shows that gambling intensifies intimate partner violence against women via financial stress, emotional stress, relationship stress, and the interaction between problem gambling, substance misuse, and mental health. In addition to this, we've just seen the recent ABS stats report on sexual violence. This revealed that sexual violence was high in households that experienced one or more cash flow problems in the last 12 months. So we know more screening and integrated service responses are needed alongside awareness raising and prevention, but I will let our wonderful speakers speak to that. So before we do jump in, and I welcome our fabulous speakers, I'll provide a couple of updates from Domestic Violence New South Wales. Last week, you would have seen that the federal government released the first action plan 2023 to 2027 as the first of 2 action plans under the 10-year national plan to end violence against women and children. The national plan outlines the collective commitment of governments across Australia to end gender-based violence in one generation. So we know that's pretty aspirational and important that these plans can meet that target that we're all very committed to. The first action plan, in parallel with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander First Action Plan, sets out the initial scope of activities and areas for action for how that vision will become a reality. With the change of the federal government and the New South Wales government, Domestic Violence New South Wales was hoping to see an action plan that delivers the planning and investment required to end family and gendered violence in one generation. The good news is that the first action plan built on several positive initiatives announced by the recent federal budget, which included the extension of the temporary visa holders experiencing violence pilot and family violence provisions for visa applications, expansion of supports for victim survivors through Services Australia, including crisis payments, initiatives to embed trauma-informed and culturally safe responses model to support victim survivors through the family law system. These were all very welcome. There was, however, a missed opportunity as far as we're concerned to coordinate national work in this plan, and the New South Wales commitments lacked the bold strategic vision required for New South Wales to deliver on the ambitious goal of ending family violence in one generation. Of concern to us is that the vast majority of the New South Wales actions and activities have previously been announced and funding allocated. We'll throw the plans in the chat box. Thanks, Emily. I think she's probably already done that. But we want to assure you we've just met with DCJ today and provided this feedback. And we will continue to liaise with the federal and New South Wales governments to ensure that the actions listed are delivered and that the first action plan is a starting point, not an end point, and that we want to see the serious investment we know that's needed in these plans going forward. We did provide some updates on our feedback and analysis back in the weekly sector news last week, and we did the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander First Action Plan analysis through our Aboriginal Senior Policy Officer this last Friday, I think it was actually. So do make sure you check our communications. Finally, and before I introduce our speakers, a quick plug on the member survey that we shared last week. We'll throw this also in the chat box. We know that we're asking for your precious time, but the survey really helps us build our engagement and ensures that we listen to your feedback and provide the best possible response to you as our members. The survey is anonymous and will take approximately 10 minutes. And we're keeping it open until Monday, the 11th of September. So we really thank you. We've had about 54 responses, I think I last heard this morning. We have 150 members, so really keen to get a really big evidence base. So thank you all for those that have completed and those that will. Now on to our incredible speakers. Today we will hear from Brianna Rosman and Sandy Abbas. Brianna Rosman is the Manager of Service Delivery and Transformation with the Office of Responsible Gambling. She leads a team that oversees the delivery of gambling treatment and support services across New South Wales. Her team forms part of the broader Office of Responsible Gambling, which leads programs and initiatives to prevent and reduce gambling harm in the New South Wales community, and provides public policy advice to government, New South Wales government, I should say. Her program areas include research, community education and awareness, intervention, support, treatment services, and public policy development. Huge welcome. Sandy Avis is a financial counsellor at Gamble Aware Hunter, New England. Sandy Avis is an accredited financial counsellor who has been working with community members impacted by gambling harm for the last 9 years. Sandy is based in Tamworth and specialises in working with clients who've been affected by gambling. Sandy has most recently commenced working with Gamble Aware, where she continues supporting people, particularly those experiencing domestic and family violence, alongside the harm of gambling. Sandy also teaches a number of Diploma of Community Services courses at TAFE, including teaching the next generation of financial counsellors. So really keen to hear that regional perspective, and obviously from both of you, I think it's going to be very, very interesting in terms of the work you cover, the advice to New South Wales Government, and we wish you a very warm welcome and we ask you to take it away. Thank you both.
Thank you very much, Delia, for that kind introduction. I'm hoping I've now shared my screen and you can all see that. Fantastic. Yes, my name is Brianna Rossman. I'm the Manager of Service Delivery and Transformation. Part of that remit is overseeing our gambling treatment and support services. But what I'll do today is I'll cover the work of the Office of Responsible Gambling, and then I'll hand over to Sandy to provide that local clinical lens, in particular that regional focus. So thank you very much. So the Office of Responsible Gambling is a business unit located within the Department of Enterprise, Investment and Trade. We sit outside of Liquor and Gaming New South Wales, but within the broader business division called Hospitality and Racing, which reports to a CEO. Our office is led by the Director, Alison Parkinson, and has about 40 staff. Our purpose is to prevent and reduce gambling harm for people at risk and the broader community, to improve individual and community wellbeing for those affected by gambling harm, to support people to make informed choices about gambling, and to contribute to public debate and influence gambling harm prevention and minimisation by government, industry, community and other stakeholders. So our current 3-year strategic plan, which ends in halfway through 2024, outlines our vision, which remains the same from when we were first established. That is New South Wales working towards zero gambling harm. The office was established in 2018 to drive the gambling harm minimisation agenda and to support the Responsible Gambling Fund and its trust. So on this slide, you'll see our approach to addressing gambling harm and the outcomes for each approach. So in the research space, we fund and support relevant, timely and rigorous research and build the capability in the gambling research field through the RGF research agenda, and build an evidence base that informs improvements to policy and regulation and evaluates and guides improvements to programs and support. So the research that we fund and support also contributes to an informed public discussion on gambling harm, increasing community awareness and understanding, and works to anticipate and keep pace with emerging trends. In the education awareness space, we develop, deliver and support awareness campaigns for the general community and targeted education awareness initiatives for priority populations. These include culturally and linguistically diverse communities, young people, Aboriginal communities, lower socioeconomic groups and other at-risk groups. We also develop accessible, engaging and evidence-based information and resources and develop partnerships with key stakeholders and influencers. In the services and support space, we work in partnership with our commissioned Gamble Aware providers to deliver accessible, evidence-based and culturally competent support and treatment services to the New South Wales community. These services are known as our Gamble Aware services publicly, and Sandy later on will talk a bit more detail about the work she does. In the leadership and influence space, we support regulatory and policy development with insights, evidence and broad-based expertise across the gambling sector, and collaborate and contribute to policy development with other jurisdictions. This includes improving gambling harm minimisation knowledge, skills and resources across a number of stakeholder groups, and working in partnership with industry to trial new approaches and innovate. So the Responsible Gambling Fund is the major fund the Office of Responsible Gambling manages. The Responsible Gambling Fund is sourced from revenues derived from the Casino Control Act and additional revenue from the point of consumption tax to support online wagering related responsible gambling initiatives. So the Minister for Hospitality and Racing oversees the Responsible Gambling Fund, and the trustees of the Responsible Gambling Fund perform an expert advisory role to assist the Minister in making decisions about the appropriate allocation of funds, as well as other gambling policy matters. The Office of Responsible Gambling supports the trustees to provide advice and guidance to the Minister on funding responsible gambling initiatives consistent with our strategic direction. Other funds that the Office of Responsible Gambling manages include the Club Grants Category 3 Fund, the Community Development Fund, and the Community Benefit Payment Program. So the Office of Responsible Gambling commissioned the New South Wales Gambling Survey in 2019 to study the prevalence of gambling in New South Wales. It was the first of its kind since 2011. The study surveyed 10,000 people over the phone, including 175 interviews in languages other than English. We found that just over 53% of 10,000 people surveyed had gambled, with lotteries being the most common form of gambling. Nearly 1 in 10 adults, 8%, had gambled online. We found that gambling was most common at the time in the far west and mid-north coast areas, and that gambling participation overall had decreased since 2006. I'll expand on that in a little bit. So the risk of harm is stable. Although fewer people are gambling, the proportion of people experiencing gambling is staying the same. The proportion of people experiencing gambling problems is staying the same. 1% of the New South Wales population were classified as problem gamblers, slightly higher than the 2011 problem gambling prevalence rate of 0.8%. The prevalence of moderate risk gamblers, 2.8%, had declined by 0.1% since 2011, but given the increase in problem gambling, the overall prevalence rate of moderate risk and problem gamblers combined had grown from 3.7% in 2011 to 3.8% in 2019. The prevalence of low-risk gambling, 6.6%, and non-problem gambling, 42.9%, had decreased since 2011. The riskiest form of gambling we found was playing EGMs, with EGM play associated with 3.6 times greater odds of being a moderate risk or problem gambler. Buying lottery tickets or instant scratchies was associated with a lower risk of experiencing problem gambling. Higher risk to gambling harm is also associated with higher gambling expenditure. Problem gamblers account for 36.7% of total gambling expenditure in New South Wales, with low and moderate risk gamblers accounting for a further 19.5% and 14.5% respectively, or 70.7% in total. So while the number of people participating has dropped, gamblers are gambling more now than ever. In 2018 to 2019, gamblers spent $9.966 billion, $130 million more than the previous year. Electronic gaming machines or pokies account for the most expenditure, followed by casino games, then racing and sports betting. Among people that gamble, the expenditure is not evenly spread, with some people gambling disproportionately high amounts compared to the rest of the group. From the 2019 gambling survey, we also know that men gamble more than women, 57% versus 47%. Some forms of gambling are more popular with certain demographic groups. People who speak languages other than English at home had lower participation across the more common forms of gambling, with an overall gambling participation rate of 36%. And we also know that Aboriginal people had a higher participation overall at 74% and across most forms of gambling. So as many of you would know, gambling harm is about more than just losing money. It is any negative consequence caused by gambling or made worse by gambling. Impact on emotional well-being includes stress and anxiety, sadness, feelings of shame and helplessness, and regret and guilt. Financial problems include excessive loans, bankruptcy, gambling more money than what people have, and unpaid bills or disconnection notices. Impact on physical health include not sleeping properly, headaches, or losing or gaining weight. The impact on education and employment include reduced performance and concentration, and gambling at work or during study time. Relationship difficulties and criminal activity are also seen as impacts of gambling harm. The most common harm sourced from the 2019 gambling survey include feeling depressed, 2.9%, feeling distressed about their gambling, 2.7%, and loss of sleep, 2.2%. The more severe harms were much less common in the survey, and an example of this is 0.3% of gamblers reported bankruptcy and 0.3% reported doing something illegal to fund gambling or pay debts. So the level of risk of gambling harm is assessed by using the Problem Gambling Severity Index, which is shown up on that slide. And this is a clinical definition, not a definition we use to describe people experiencing harm. We know from our research that for each person with a gambling problem, they affect about 6 other people, such as family and friends. The affected others are normally family, friends of the person with the gambling problem, but it could be the wider community as well. From this research, we also know that about 25% of people experiencing gambling problems seek help, and that isn't necessarily through our support or treatment services. That could be any type of help. We also know that 20% think they have no problem, and 21% think they can beat the problem on their own. So the survey that we conducted found that while a small proportion of people who gamble reported harms, some groups experience more harms than others. So men experience more harms than women. Young people aged 18 to 24 who gamble experience more harms than all other gamblers. Gamblers who spoke a language other than English were twice as likely to experience harm as those who only spoke English at home. And Aboriginal people who gamble are more likely to experience harm than non-Indigenous people that gamble. So in terms of our approach, research plays a key role in the work of Gamble Aware and the Responsible Gambling Fund by providing the evidence base we use to design prevention, intervention and support initiatives for the New South Wales community. The Responsible Gambling Fund research agenda guides all of our research and aligns with our strategic plan. We consulted researchers, counsellors, policymakers and industry representatives to seek their views on research priorities for our current strategic plan, and we then worked with our RGF trustees to develop our 3-year agenda. So our 2021 to 2024 priorities are presented on this slide. So each year we put our research agenda into action by developing an annual research plan, outlining projects that will be commissioned in the coming year that will contribute to our objectives and align with our research priorities. So one key area that we have been discussing at an RGF trust level is the link between domestic and family violence and gambling harm. And so that's something we discuss quite frequently at our trust meetings, and the importance of building an evidence base. So some of our commission research and some of the priorities for our future forward from 2024 onwards look at these areas. So we encourage a wide range of research activities, including literature reviews, academic and applied research projects, data analysis and data linkage studies, pilots and trials to test feasibility, as well as evaluations of programs and services. Our published research was either fully funded by the Responsible Gambling Fund or undertaken in collaboration with other states and territories through Gambling Research Australia. Some examples of funded research include the New South Wales Gambling Survey, which I've mentioned. The intent of that survey was to understand gambling in New South Wales, who gambles, how gambling is changing, the extent of gambling harm, and how different regions are affected. It also provides a snapshot of gambling in 2019 that can be used for comparisons with past and in the future for our gambling prevalence surveys. So a new survey will be commissioned very shortly that will go out to market and will have new up-to-date statistics and information available once that's completed. So another piece of research that we published was the New South Wales Youth Gambling Study, which is a study that aims to increase the understanding of gambling and simulated gambling by young people aged 12 to 17 years in New South Wales in order to prevent and reduce gambling harm. The findings of the report informed a program of our work focused on the education and awareness of parents, young people and the community through schools, sport, online and social media. And I'll talk in a bit more detail about that shortly. Another piece of research was our Responsible Conduct of Gambling study, which is a study that aims to contribute to the review and potential improvement of RCG, Responsible Conduct of Gambling, practices in New South Wales venues. The findings from this research inform the Gaming Machines Amendment Bill 2020 and continues to inform policy improvements that are being rolled out across the New South Wales government, in particular with Liquor and Gaming New South Wales. Okay, so this graphic here presents the gambling harm prevention continuum. We adopt a public health approach to address gambling harm. This means shifting away from predominantly targeting problem gamblers, their family and friends. Instead, we focus more on the needs of the general community and those at risk to prevent and reduce gambling-related harm. In the prevention space, we achieve this by conducting broad programs to raise awareness and build capacities among the general public, for example, mass media campaigns. In the early intervention space, we run specific projects for those at risk of gambling harm. An example of this is our Gamble Aware in Schools program. In the help-seeking space, we fund interventions for those affected by gambling harm, which are our support and treatment services delivered through our Gamble Aware providers. Our approach to projects and programs depends on the needs of the population, but we fund and implement education awareness initiatives through partnerships, grants programs, direct commissioning, and through directly developing and delivering the work ourselves. Our priority populations, which have been determined from research that we've conducted, include men who are more likely to gamble and to have problems with gambling than women and are less likely to seek help. Young people aged 12 to 24 who participate in different and evolving forms of gambling and gambling-like activities more than previous generations, and they also have significant exposure to gambling online and through advertising. Culturally diverse communities who are more likely to experience gambling harm despite their lower participation rates. Factors such as different beliefs around luck and chance and migration stresses also contribute to harm. And Aboriginal communities who can be vulnerable to gambling harm due to factors such as unemployment rates, larger size households, and early exposure to gambling. Our other priority populations include affected others, which includes carers, partners, and family members who can experience harm as a result of someone else's gambling. And then people with comorbidities who may be more likely to experience gambling harm and face barriers to accessing support. And this includes people with mental health and substance abuse issues, people with disabilities, and those at risk of suicide, homelessness, and domestic violence. So some of the other work that we do to raise awareness of gambling and gambling harm includes awareness campaigns. So the Gamble Aware campaign launched in 2022 to drive awareness of the new Gamble Aware brand and our website. The aim of the campaign was to encourage the New South Wales community to access the Gamble Aware website for information, tools, education, and resources. So we have set bursts of this campaign to market at various times. The Number That Changed Our Life campaign is a bespoke campaign designed to directly engage people from called communities, which was a first in Australia. The following audiences were selected for the campaign: Mandarin, Cantonese, Korean, Arabic, Vietnamese, and Hindi. The concept for the campaign involves chasing your lucky numbers, and we position the Gamble Aware helpline number 1800 858 858 to be those lucky numbers, hence the campaign tagline, The Number That Changed Our Life. The campaign again has certain bursts and is in market at various times throughout the year. Gamble Aware Week is another initiative which we hold annually to increase awareness of gambling and gambling harm in the New South Wales community. This year, Gamble Aware Week will take place from the 16th to the 22nd of October, and any organisations wishing to get involved in Gamble Aware Week are welcome to contact me after this presentation, and we have a creative and marketing piece of work that sits to support organisations that wish to get involved in that campaign. So some of the other work that we do in the education awareness space is to develop education programs for rollout across the state. Gamble Aware in Schools is a program that uses a school setting to apply a whole of school approach to address gambling harm in children and young people. The strategies include a curriculum approach through creating classroom-ready teaching resources for teachers, and this is already underway for English, Maths, and PDHPE, and we'll also utilise our Gamble Aware providers to provide specialty workshops for students, teachers, and their parents to supplement these in-classroom resources. So it's expected that our Gamble Aware providers are in place to support any schools that wish to be involved and any organisations that wish to run any parent workshops in their local area. We also partner with the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners and the Centre for Community Welfare Training to provide professional training workshops to health and community professionals so that they can screen for gambling harm and refer clients in a timely manner. In addition to that, we've run our local prevention grants program, and this program supports local strategies to support people to make informed decisions about gambling, breaking down the stigma around gambling, and encourage people to seek advice and support. Over $1.5 million was awarded to projects targeting communities at risk of experiencing gambling harm, including young people, Aboriginal and CALD communities. So the final education program that I just wanted to mention today was the Odds On Youth program. This is a capacity building program for youth organisations to reduce gambling harm among young people who already access their services. 9 projects were funded for just over $400,000, and half of these programs, all these programs are now complete, and the remainder are yet to be evaluated. So we'll evaluate that whole program and determine our next steps, but that program has seen great success in a number of local communities. So sporting partnerships are a key initiative of our strategic plan to reduce and prevent gambling-related harm. We launched Reclaim the Game in 2020, and it's in response to the growth of online sports betting and the saturation of sports betting advertising. The aim of partnering with big sporting teams is to take a stand and challenge the impact that sports betting advertising has on fans. As part of the partnership, the teams will not accept any sports betting sponsorship or promotional agreements from the time that they sign the agreement. And supporters and local communities can enjoy sports without betting, and staff, players and fans can be educated about gambling risks. Our Reclaim the Games partners span across 5 codes and include Cricket New South Wales, Western Sydney Wanderers, the Sydney Swans, Macarthur Football Club, Sydney Kings and Sydney Flames, and in the NRL, Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs and South Sydney Rabbitohs. You may have seen some of our advertising during sports games or out in the public. All right, so now I want to talk through our service delivery model. So the Gamble Aware service delivery model was introduced in July of 2021 and involves a no wrong door approach that enables individuals to choose how they want to interact with the service system. The office has contracted Gamble Aware providers to deliver a range of gambling support and treatment services across 10 identified regions in New South Wales. These providers adopt a stepped care approach, which is an approach that means clients are able to transfer between varied modes and intensities of service in a way that is responsive to geographical location, preference for anonymity, and readiness for therapeutic treatment. The service system is underpinned by the Gambleware digital platform and website, which supports services by enabling referrals, scheduling, and facilitating various modes of support being delivered. So in 2024, the digital platform will later be made available to the public and allow people to book appointments in real time to see a counsellor. So as mentioned, Gambleware providers are our key partners who are commissioned to deliver community education and outreach and a broad range of support and treatment services tailored to the needs of their local community. There are 10 Gambleware providers, of which you will see on screen. 5 of those are regional and 5 metro, which you can see on the right-hand side of the slide. These Gambleware providers replace the 55 previous gambling help providers that were contracted in the past under our old gambling help support model. So the office also runs a number of services and programs to support the improvement and quality of services that are available across New South Wales. To ensure Gamble Aware services are accessible and responsive to the needs of the Aboriginal communities and CALD communities, this is the purpose that we have these services. The office established 2 statewide services, our Gamble Aware Multicultural Service and our Gamble Aware Aboriginal Service, which are in place to build the cultural capacity of Gamble Aware providers. So Western Sydney Local Health District deliver our Gamble Aware statewide multicultural service, and the Gamble Aware Aboriginal service is delivered by New South Wales Aboriginal Safe Gambling Services, and this organisation is an Aboriginal owned organisation that's been in the gambling treatment and support space for a number of years. In addition to these 2 services, we also have the Gamble Aware Legal Engagement and Education Program, which educates Gamble Aware providers about common legal issues faced by people experiencing gambling harm. In addition to that, we also focus on how to navigate the legal system to support and refer clients and to establish relationships with legal providers in their region. The program will also raise awareness amongst local legal service providers such as legal aid, community legal centres and law firms across New South Wales about gambling harm and the range of legal issues that people experiencing gambling harm may face. And the program is managed by the Association of Children's Welfare Agencies through its training arm, the Centre of Community Welfare Training. So it's running throughout 2023, and it consisted of an initial engagement phase to understand the capacity and the landscape of knowledge of common legal issues within each of the 10 Gamble Aware regions. And there'll be education workshops rolled out later in the year. And one of the topics that's been identified is domestic and family violence, and making referrals to local legal services, but also making sure that both legal services and Gamble Aware providers are equipped with knowledge of how to interact with clients and how to make safe referrals to make sure people get the help that they need. So that will be one of the areas of focus that will be included as part of that legal education program, as well as a few others, including elder abuse, guardianship, a range of other issues. Okay, we also fund the Gamble Aware Helpline and the Gambling Help Online service, and these services are in place to provide brief intervention and crisis support to people that need assistance in the moment. These services operate to provide immediate support and then refer clients who require ongoing support to our Gamble Aware providers in each region. Now, one feature of our Gamble Aware model is that our Gamble Aware providers and these service providers of the helpline and the Gambling Help Online service work as part of one service system. So in the past, it was quite disjointed, but now making sure that client-centered care and the facilitation of the process for clients is clear and the referral pathways are clear is something that we've really worked on as part of the implementation of the Gamble Aware model. So Gamble Aware services and support both clients that are experiencing a gambling problem, as well as family members and affected others. And I just wanted to talk on that issue again, talk on that point again. Our services provide both therapeutic and financial counselling to people experiencing gambling harm, as well as more intensive or less intensive support for affected others. Now, last from me before I hand over to Sandy. So as mentioned earlier, we launched the Gamble Aware website in 2021, which provides information to educate and support the community to gamble safely, as well as information about our research, grants, partnership, education work, our awareness raising campaigns. And early next year, people will be able to go onto this website to actually book in a counselling appointment. The Gamble Aware website also houses a number of resources, fact sheets and materials for people to use, and these can be provided in hard copy. So if anyone's interested in getting access to hard copies, please get in contact with me after this presentation. I will now pass on to Sandy, and as mentioned earlier by Delia, Sandy is going to talk through her experience from a counsellor's perspective, working with clients experiencing, presenting with gambling harm and domestic and family violence, how to connect clients to our service system, what to expect, and how community organisations can get involved with Gamble Aware providers. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna. So yes, I am Sandy Avis, and I'm working in the Gambling Aware space at the moment. So if you want to go to the next slide. Yep. All right. So the Gambling Aware service. So really, what do we do? So there is support for the public, and that support is free and confidential, face-to-face, online, and telephone counselling. We have some psychological treatment for gambling and counselling for partners and families. We assist in self-exclusions from clubs, hotels, casinos. We have got a targeted initiatives for our multicultural and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. And we also provide that outreach work to groups such as the prison populations and AOD programs, and other programs that are around in our areas. So it is an area that we know we really need to let the community know what we're here and how they can help us. Some research by Live Life Well indicates that 58% of people experiencing gambling harm also have alcohol or other drug issues, and 38% have a mental health condition as well. So to address the impact of gambling harm on the community, it's important for clinicians to start screening and to have the tools appropriate to do so. So what sort of things can you do as an organisation? What's the question you can ask, really? So with our domestic violence clients, it could be simply asking, how has gambling impacted you and your family? Or we could use some of the screenings, such as, do you gamble? Can you tell me more about it? What type of gambling do you engage in? How often? How much money do you spend? Has there been a time you spent more money than you intended, or does it have an impact on other areas of your life? So they're just sort of some of the examples. But it's really important to ask about gambling in a way that's compassionate and non-judgmental, and also allows for that space for the clients to reflect on their gambling and their impact on their lives. So a lot of people that will come to see you in the domestic violence space will be on the other side. So it's from their partners who have been gambling, not so much that they're actually gambling themselves. So they've been impacted considerably by the gambling. So we're going to hopefully have a bit of a talk about doing that. So on the next slide, you'll see, as Brianna indicated before, there are a number of validated questionnaires that can be used. There's the PGSI, which is the Problem Gambling Severity Index. Not that you need to use it, but it is a great tool to give somebody who is gambling so that you can actually see where they lie. Or the Lie Bet questionnaire. And again, that's just 2 questions, but it does sort of help to indicate where somebody's lies at with that gambling, if they're actually gamblers themselves. So connecting clients with gambling aware. We know people experiencing gambling harm vary in their readiness for change and struggle with the stigmas and the judgment about their feelings towards that gambling. And this may be the first time they've even considered gambling or even discussed it. I know as a financial counsellor, many of my clients, 90% of my clients don't come because they've got a gambling problem. They come because they've got a financial issue, and it's the bank that's got the problem or the creditor that's got the problem. So it's about having that connection with our clients. Even if a client's not ready to seek help yet, there's still value in starting that conversation about gambling with them. And that gives them that time to actually check in on themselves and have a look. So the office encourages services working with those experiencing gambling harm to refer people to gambling aware supports and treatment services. And this can be achieved through the provision of the gambling aware fact sheets, which Brianna mentioned earlier, that are on our gambling aware site. And you can access them on that website. These include the centralised contact number, which is 1800 858 858, and a website that can be used as well. There's locally appropriate gambling aware providers who will conduct the intake process and commence the client's journey. So here in our area, we have a community engagement officer who and does the intakes. So the client would be undertakes an intake with them, and then they're referred to the therapeutic counselling or to financial counselling, or both, whatever they need. And we understand that often people who are gambling will present with other issues that require an even more urgent attention, and referral to those specialisations are more appropriate. But dealing with a gambling matter is something that we need to look at. So if you are referring somebody to another service, to refuge, whatever, letting them know that there is that information about gambling aware if they need it down the track, and how to get in contact with us. It is important the gambling related issues are not left untreated, and as these can have negative effects. Now we get into what I'd like. All right. So why would you refer a client for a financial counselling session? So me personally, I think every domestic violence client should be seeing a financial counsellor, whether that's a gambling specific or just a generalist. And the reason I say that is that there's a lot of areas that people are impacted by. And we know people with gambling issues will gamble with money that's allocated for living expenses. They will pawn goods, they redraw on their mortgages, they have multiple credit cards, payday loans, and even loans which loan sharks sort of things. Some people with gambling issues even resort to stealing money to fund their gambling, and problem gamblers will often react with anger, blame, depression, shock, outrage, or even violence if their behaviour is challenged. So we know that most people with gambling issues are also affected by trauma. So referring a client for that financial health check, and I say for all domestic violence, and I have the reason is, if you have a client that's looking at leaving a relationship, financially, she needs to know, can she afford to leave? Is there something the financial counsellor can do to help her save some money so she can actually leave that relationship? Is there any joint debt? Is there any debts that she needs to be aware of that could impact her leaving and impact her getting housing and moving down further on? Is there any joint debt? Is there any equity? There's a whole lot of things there that the financial counsellor will do a health check with her to see where she is financially. And next example, next slide. So we do know that there is a crossover between the domestic and family violence and gambling harm. And as indicated earlier, somebody did talk about the ANROS research that was recently done. And in that latest research of September 2020, it cites 48 women with a problem gambling partner reported being subjected to severe economic abuse, including economic exploitation and economic control. And we know economic exploitation occurs when the man took the money or resources from the woman to fund his gambling. This dominated the woman's experience of economic abuse, as he staked a claim to whatever money and resources the woman had, often without her permission. So let's have a look at a couple of case studies from clients that I have recently seen. So Mary is in the Staying Home Leaving Violence program. After quite a number of appointments with her caseworker, she actually disclosed her husband is gambling and she was worried about her finances. She had a mortgage which was in joint names. So as a financial counsellor, she was referred to me because of the gambling, and we were able to work with her and her solicitor to actually look at her property settlements and to ensure that she wasn't losing the equity in that property during this process of leaving the relationship. So that took a number of appointments with the solicitors, with me, and just getting a full idea so that we could protect her future financial health, so that in the future she could be back into living in a house in her own name and moving forward. Another example I have is of Jane. Jane was staying at a local refuge, and when Jane came to see me, initially it wasn't actually disclosed that there was any gambling in the relationship, and so she saw me as just as a financial counsellor. We looked at what bills were in her name, was the power on, was the rent on, what other debts were happening, and how is she going to be able to maintain those debts while she was in the refuge, and what was the benefits that she could use that money for. So we were able to work with her and look at her joint liability. We looked at her credit history. We were able to talk to the banks to see about what grants were available, what grants the banks could do, how the bank would work with her, looking at victims' comp, looking at her immediate needs as well as any financial loss. She was, Jane had, while she was seeing me, it was disclosed that she was paying a loan for a motorbike, and one of her service providers actually had helped her to negotiate a payment arrangement in hardship. When I spoke to Jane about that motorbike, it was disclosed that she didn't actually have a motorcycle license. She did not actually purchase the bike for herself. She was coerced into having that motorbike. So every time she made a payment, whether it was in hardship or not, that was just traumatizing and reliving that financial abuse that she'd been suffering for quite a long time. And so working with a financial counsellor, we were able to actually have that loan written off. It was not, the loan should never have gone forward in the first place. And so working with somebody that has that ability to negotiate with the banks, we were able to let them know that this was, the loan was taken out illegally. And she shouldn't be impacted by that loan for the next 5-10 years. That way she was able to move forward and move forward with her life and not be worried about all those debts that were, as we call them, in sexually transmitted debts, so STDs. So she's moved forward quite a lot since that time. If we go back to the last one, because you skipped one, another client, and I should have given you a different name, was Jane, another lady that I saw. She actually was in the refuge, but Jane was playing the pokies. Jane was playing the pokies because that was her coping mechanism. She'd been in a domestic violence situation for 30, 40 years, and as the violence escalated in that cycle, then she would go to the club and pub and she would play. And then that would make it worse because there was no money in the house, and that would continue that cycle, which was making it hard for her. None of these clients actually identified that there was gambling involved initially. So it's up to us as services to actually be asking and be aware and letting clients know, has there been any impact of gambling? Has this financial led to what's going on in your house? So it's important that we all work together. As I say, I very much think every domestic violence, no matter what, should be seeing a financial counsellor. And I think the other end is every domestic violence service should be screening to see what is there, do we need to look deeper into it, and how we can work together. So finally, how can we support our clients? So there are a number of things in addition to educating yourself about the referrals. So we know the referrals is 1800 858 858. To improve awareness of gambling harm that may be prevalent amongst your clients. So get in contact with your local gambling aware provider, ask for information about any local resources, get to know who your gambling aware staff are and how to refer to them. Keep the contact details of the Gambling Aware helpline and Gambling Aware website, and even the online crisis support on hand for clients. And look at the available training and workshops that you could attend to further educate yourself about gambling harm. And these are on the Gambling Aware website. And that is all from me. So thank you.
Sandy and Brianna, that was really, really helpful. Thank you so much for the different contexts and information you both provided there. If we could keep that slide up for a second, and if Brianna and Sandy don't mind, would you be able to throw those emails also in the chat box, just so our members can possibly reach out if they've got any further queries?
Yep, sure.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was fantastic. So we now have about just under 10 minutes for questions. There has been a couple thrown in the chat box. Emily, did you want to read out the first couple, and then I will keep an eye on hands up? Thank you.
Yes, happy to. The first one was for Brianna, and I just need to find it again. So this one's from Hannah, and Hannah says, considering the correlations between gambling and perpetration of violence in the home, I'm wondering if your work includes working with the gambling industry around how they can fund DFE recovery pathways for those who are victims and for people who use violence. If not, how can we collectively be advocating for that industry to support DFE recovery and men's behaviour change programs?
Thanks for the question, Hannah. Look, I think this is something that internally within the RGF Trust, and also something we have been discussing with government. And that is, okay, we know that there is a link. We know there's a correlation. What do we do now? And so I think what we have been getting back a lot of the time is, where's the evidence base? You've got, the NRO's research that's done. So our first priority is making sure that we're investing money into the research to build the evidence base, and then to take that research and work out, okay, well, where's the most effective use of funding and where do we go to from here? So I think, yes, the work there's been discussions with the gambling industry, but that is our primary focus in the short term. In addition to that, what I will say is we run, and I think a little bit later down, Maria's written a comment about it. We have a program called the Community Benefit Payments Program, which I talked really briefly about at the beginning. Now that money, where a venue in New South Wales applies for an increase in their gaming machine entitlement, they're required to make a community contribution payment to the Responsible Gambling Fund. Now, we then take that money, we convene a panel, and we determine, based on the areas of need within that community, the best use of the funding. So, Maria, your organisation, which I can't remember off the top of my head, the Women's Cottage, so they were a recipient of that funding in their particular local area. And so that is, I guess, industry funding going back out to the community. Though I will say that's not a standard grant system. That's really dependent on that program and venues applying for an increase in their gaming machine entitlement. But we are seeing quite a number of panels needing to be convened and funding coming to the Responsible Gambling Fund. So that is one avenue. But as I mentioned earlier, our primary focus at the moment is research, determining the evidence base, and then determining where to from here. So there are things we can keep doing and discussions we're having with our service providers and with government about raising the profile. But then it's about, I think we're a little bit away from determining how to and what the distribution of funding looks like, and really getting buy-in from industry without putting an incentive of having to legislate it in there. Okay.
Thank you, Brianna. I'll add just from Diane Mann's excellent and expansive service you provide in these trying circumstances for so many women. It was, so that's some wonderful feedback to you both. Does anyone want to pop their hand up for some questions? I can add one or two if people don't and get things going. A couple actually. So the first one would be, have you seen, oh sorry Maria, I'll quickly jump in and then I'll throw the baton back. Have you seen a climate change with the new government, the new Labour government? Has it felt different? Has there been instant meetings with ministers? Are things feeling different, or is it kind of you're continuing to provide that advice and it feels like a slow approach? It would be it'd be good for us to hear how that feels, that is if there is a climate change, and how that feels from your perspective.
I can speak to that on a very high level, and I can hopefully everyone can appreciate that I can't go into too much detail. But what I would say is progress has not slowed down on our strategic plan or any of the initiatives that we have that we had in the pipeline prior to the change of government. I think we're in not a lucky, but we have the benefit of being separate, and the trust, whoever the minister of the day is, are always going to provide their advice. They're that kind of steady voice to government. So I think probably the bits that we aren't responsible for in terms of the reforms to the gambling industry and gambling policy, that's obviously gained momentum, and we saw that as part of the election, and since the new government's been in play, that's progressed. But in our work in the support space and in terms of our advocacy work and advice to the minister and the agenda of the trust, that certainly hasn't changed. In fact, I think irrespective of the change of government, that's just gaining momentum and will continue to. And we're about to embark on our next strategic plan exercise. And I think we're in a very good position to be determining what our next priorities are and what our new strategic direction is going to be. And a lot of it is the work we're already doing. So doesn't directly answer your question, but hopefully gives a bit of insight into where we are. Yeah.
Thank you for that. No, that does give insight. Maria, so sorry for stealing the question, and then we'll go to Bev.
That's okay. That's fine. So the first one is what's already there. The Women's Cottage does get some ORG funding for DV casework. So I would just keep that in mind if your other services. But we're working in partnership with Gambling Aware, Blue Mountains and Western Sydney. So I'm assuming that those workers who are going to do our presentation can get in contact with you to access some of that information that you provided. Would that be right in me thinking that?
Sure. And look, you should have already been given access, and apologies if you haven't. I will follow that up to some of those resources to facilitate those sessions. Get into contact with me after this session. I put my email address in there, and we can get that sorted, for you to be able to have those access.
Okay. And just the other two parts of that, as well as the information that you provided, I guess that what we're keen in terms of part of what we're wanting to, I guess, put in people's minds in terms of general community sector workers is that if they are working with someone who has a gambling problem, to just be aware that there could be safety issues at the home. So not just if you're working with somebody who's already known to be impacted by domestic violence of exploring gambling, but if you're working with someone who has a family where there's already gambling issues, that there needs to be some awareness around those safety issues. So that's part of what we'd like to explore. The other thing is that we, as part of our grant, we're committed to at least trialling some sort of support group for women who have been impacted by both gambling and domestic violence. But we're not tied to doing that as a face-to-face program in the Hawkesbury. So if there were other services in other areas who might have women who would benefit from that sort of a group, we could consider an online group as a trial basis. Again, in partnership with Gambling Aware for the gambling side of it, and a DV expert, like some sort of co-facilitation. So I just wanted to put that out there because, finding enough women for a support group in one small area may not be as doable as thinking about it as an issue that we might have more of a reach if we do something online. So I just want to put that out there. I'll also put my email in the chat, but yeah, just to be aware that there are a few other shades of the issue than what was on your presentation. Yeah.
Really appreciate that insight and feedback, Maria, and welcome Sandy and Brianna following up if they can around that consultation piece. So final question, Bev, and then we're going to be closing up. So take the floor, Bev. You might be on mute, but your screen's gone. Thanks, Bev.
Dinosaur. Thank you so much, Brianna and Sandy, for the presentation. It's great for us to be able to remind our WDV CASs, our workers across the state, around what you advise, Sandy, with talking to them about their financial situations. I know that will happen generally, but it's quite good to have it kind of specifically put in that way. And also the training information as well, really handy for us to know. But I just have a question that follows on from the first question a little bit around government, because what comes to mind for me is the constant, even though you've got those relationships and partnerships with sporting clubs and organisations, when I see sport on TV, I see massive chunks of time given to encouraging gambling, followed by a 2-second kind of just be careful about that. It's sort of at the end. How much influence can you have to kind of remove those things when people, obviously some clubs are coming alongside, not being sponsored, not using that money and I know it's big money, but not using it for their own purposes and making a stand. Is that improving, or does government fold to the big gambling organisations?
Look, it's not a straightforward answer. What I would do is I'd recommend, this is a topic that came up as part of the inquiry into online gambling and its impacts on gambling harm, the federal inquiry, and it was a topic that was discussed extensively. Our view is we're never going to be able to beat the gambling companies in the current setting, unless the Australian Communications and Media Authority steps in, and legislation potentially changes. But our view with the Reclaim the Game program, and all other states and territories have quite similar programs set up with various funding amounts, is just having the voice, having the name out there will influence to a point. And then the view and the long-term vision is that hopefully the industry will take a bit more responsibility and nominate or voluntarily start including responsible gambling messaging. So it's not that simple. There's a lot of different players, stakeholders in play, and it's going to be something we continue to advocate for on a New South Wales level to the federal government. But I think it's an ongoing conversation. I think now more than ever, we're open as a community to have that conversation, and I think governments are more open to having that conversation with industry than ever before. So it's an important topic. Yeah.
Thanks, Brianna. Advocate and agitate, eh? Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for hanging on for those that last question. Really appreciate that, Bev. Thank you, Brianna and Sandy. That was awesome. And everybody will do a recording of this session. I think there was so much gold in here and some really good follow-up questions of what Maria's doing and at the cottage and what have you. So thanks everyone for coming. The next sector chat I mentioned is a sector chat with people with Disability Australia on some of their research and programs, their building access stuff. So we hope to see you on the 10th of October. You've got Brianna and Sandy's emails, and if there's any follow-up with us, it's admin@dvnsw.org.au. Big shout out to Emily, our social work student, who was killing it today, covering all the bits and pieces. So thank you, and we'll see you all soon. Take care. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Bye.